Great. So welcome everybody to the September learning community for the Moving Maine Network. Excited to have you here today, and just inviting people to put in the chat how you're connected to mobility work in Maine and what region you're in. And then if you want to say something about your favorite fall foods or activities, please do that as well. Nice to see faces. If you are in a spot where you can put your camera on, it's always really nice to get to enjoy each other, the energy from seeing each other. But we'll try to, really encourage you to use the chat to network and to react and share what you have going on. And we're really hoping to have today be as much about hearing perspectives and wisdom from around the room as from Mariah and I, who will be sharing information. And I think over time, that's kind of my goal, and our goal as Moving Maine is to be like have stimulating conversation in these groups. And so I'm just going to share a couple of slides to get us started. We are recording, as you heard. We are asking people to stay muted unless you're contributing, just to improve the sound quality. And we do have live captioning, so that's available and you can turn that on for yourself. And as you already know, we have introductions in the chat, so thank you for doing that. So I'm Zoe, my name's not on there, I should probably throw that on there, but so I'm Zoe Miller, I'm the facilitator of the Moving Maine Network. And we really, I know most of the folks who are here today have heard about the Moving Maine Network, so I won't spend a long time on it, but we do like to put out at the beginning of any session we do that we're striving to do these learning community sessions in as inclusive and equitable way as possible. So we're always interested in feedback on how it's working, and if folks need different things to be able to participate. Centering equity, as we've talked about other times, and you may have seen this graphic before, is about thinking about everybody getting what they need to be able to participate. And so the way that then plays out in the transportation realm is that we're looking to create systems so that the folks with the most barriers can overcome those barriers and reach opportunities. And this Robert Wood Johnson graphic that talks about how, we want to move from equality, which is really important for folks to get access to the same things, but move to equity, where we really target what people need. And so, when we're talking about, quote unquote, vulnerable populations or disadvantaged populations, some of these terms don't feel warm and fuzzy, but we're talking about people, right? We're talking about older adults, which we're all aging, we're all going to be an older adult. We're talking about children, we're talking about folks who are returning from incarceration and need access to transportation because they're not allowed to have a license. We're talking about folks who have disabilities that make it so they can't operate a vehicle. So we know that folks need different things, and that we can galvanize together around where we overlap. And that when we do that, when we think about the needs of all the different folks who have barriers, I really believe we make it better for everybody. And so I always think of, if you think of like your grandmother pushing a baby carriage through an intersection, when we make it better for folks who are using wheelchairs, we're making it easier for folks who are pushing carriages and folks who are moving more slowly, which is a lot of us at different points in our life. So our core strategies are, as Moving Maine, are to strengthen the network. And so we're here today doing that, helping to strengthen the connections between all of us. We're informing policy change. And so I'm really excited to talk a bit about advocacy and how we can use grassroots advocacy to do that. And we are supporting better coordination on a local, regional, and statewide level. So really trying to get more mobility management to exist around the state. And I think of that as, that's sort of a mouthful, that term, but it's people whose job it is to make sure that transportation solutions happen. It's really that simple. And then finally, we want to amplify mobility stories. And I think, we all know how important stories are, and how change really depends on personalizing what the barriers are and telling stories. So I hope some of those stories come through today. I know, we see ourselves as Moving Maine as being a collector of stories, and we're going to be doing more with that. So we invite you to share stories. So and so our goals for these sessions is to share expertise, and and I define expertise really broadly. So like, we're all the experts in our lives. We're the experts in our experiences. It's not about having a PhD or, some other degree. It might be, but I think together we have all different types of expertise. And then our second goal is we really want to help move people to action on transportation solutions. So what I would love is for you to hear something today that inspires you, that then you are like, I want to do that in my community, or that gave me an insight on how to do that. And so then building relationships, of course, is really key to that. Knowing who do you call when you need information, who do you look to make the solutions happen. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to might need to make Mariah, I'm going to make you co-host, so you'll be able to share your slides. But before, I just want to quickly introduce Mariah. And I think it's Food and Medicine is an organization that, if you don't know about it, I think you'll be pretty intrigued by it after today. And I think what Food and Medicine is doing is really inspiring in terms of how you can get regular folks from organizations, folks from the community to get involved and to be engaging in ways of moving change in their communities. And so I think that often we're, and especially post pandemic, or if we want to say we're post, but having gone through the pandemic, I think so much is happening virtually that I think we all probably could use space to think about how we get people engaged, and how we kind of deal with engagement in our new reality. So really excited to hear from Mariah today. She's a new organizer with Food and Medicine, which is based in Brewer. And she got her master's degree in labor relations from Rutgers University, and has worked with labor unions and office and professional employees and the organization Unite Here. And she enjoys growing and preserving food, and worked as a professional beekeeper during COVID, which sounds pretty cool. So Mariah, we're really happy to have you here today, and I'll turn it over to you to share with all of us.
All right. Hi. Like she said, I am a brand new organizer with Food and Medicine. I actually started on Labor Day. Let me get this going here. Okay, thumbs up if you can see that. All right, awesome. So Transportation for All is a committee of Food and Medicine. So Food and Medicine was started in 2002 as a response to paper mill closings. So our roots are very much labor union oriented and labor union focused. And you'll see how Transportation for All actually plays into that. So transportation for all, public transportation fits into our labor-centric values. People who choose between, we're focused on people that are choosing between food, medicine, and other necessities. And a lot of those people tend to ride public transportation. So, whenever we're thinking about our audience, thinking about who we are reaching out to, that's kind of how we strategize. Jack McKay is the man that started food and medicine. He, really specifically wanted to show those people that they can make a difference as well. This also, whenever you target people outside of your usual, kind of who you talk to normally, because food and medicine started helping out laid off paper mill workers and organizing laid off paper mill workers. When you kind of go outside of that original, who you're targeting, you build a stronger organization. And something that was also important with this committee is that we're letting the people that are most affected lead. So Transportation for All is made up of people that actually use public transportation. So it is entirely made up of people that ride the bus. And we also, so Transportation for All, Jack was telling me that it's really special because where we started originally was we reached out directly to ATU, which is the Amalgamated Transit Union. They are the people that, they're the union for the bus drivers. So a little bit of a condensed timeline, like where we started. So Transportation for All started in 2014, and it was originally started to support bus drivers who were forming their union with ATU Local 714. And after that, that's when they started, after figuring out what the bus drivers needed and supporting those bus drivers forming their union, then that's when we started bringing in other transit riders. So the first big action was in July of 2013 to save the Audlin Road bus route in Bangor, which I was told that they did end up saving it and getting funding for it for another year. After that, there was a campaign to build rider support and build, worker and transit rider power for cleaning the buses. So it was building rider support and power for cleaning the buses. So Transportation for All actually gained funding for a new position to clean the buses. Transportation for All also interviewed candidates for Bangor City Council. They did that every year to see who was pro-bus. And so they were about to cut off service to Hampton, which is another bus route. So in 2018, they helped highlight pro-bus candidates in a special election that saved that service. And then the big kind of where we're leading up to today, Transportation for All advocated for surveys. So there were a bunch of surveys to build a bus hub in downtown Bangor. And they were trying not to build it in downtown Bangor because they don't want poor people that ride the bus in downtown. So it was very obvious classism. So Bangor spent nearly $300,000 to do 3 studies to find anywhere else for the bus hub besides Pickering Square in downtown. And that fight was won in January of 2020. And the building is almost completed. And it's in Pickering Square because, the surveys, I was told, went through about 14 different locations, and all of them, every single company that they brought in said that Pickering Square was the best location for the bus hub. And that building is almost completed. It should be opening at the beginning of October, and we are in the process of planning events around that. So, okay, where are we now? New faces, that's me. I started September 5th. So I've been here for, approximately a month. So Also, we're trying to kind of like get things going again because COVID's hit everybody. It's the same COVID issues that every group is having everywhere. We're starting to do things like distributing meals on the bus again. So whenever we were talking to folks about, different campaigns that we were running, we would partner with the local business, buy a bunch of breakfasts, and go give them out on the bus. That would open up conversations, and who doesn't like free food? So we're getting involved around the hub opening. We're reaching out to ATU, and we're also talking about doing a press conference whenever the hub opens. We're also attending, we got a seat on the city transit committee. So we've been attending BAC's transit committee meetings as a member at the table. And we're supporting designated stops. So the designated stops, it's one of those things where we keep getting told it's going to happen, and it keeps getting kind of pushed and pushed and pushed. So we're going to use that as something to build momentum around, to kind of get going again post-COVID. So that is kind of an abbreviated version of where we're at and what we're doing. But my goal coming here was not to talk at you. I wanted to learn from everybody else as well. So like, what is working for people right now? What isn't? How are you reaching people post-pandemic? Got a message in the chat here. So the hub is it's a bus hub. So it's where people can catch the bus and where all the buses for all the different routes will go. So I don't know if this is well known. I should have covered this. Bangor actually is one of like 2 flag stop systems in the United States. So right now the buses go on a route, but there are no stops. So you kind of stand along the bus route and flag the bus down. So that actually makes it kind of hard to ride the bus. They have a bus ambassador program to kind of teach people how to ride the bus. So the hub is going to be at least one place where everybody can go and catch a bus. So I am not aware that was ever considered. That would be something that I would want to talk to Jack about, since he was mostly involved in that fight. Also, something that is coming up for us is lobbying at the Bangor City Council, because there's a lot of things that are, going to be more political fights than anything. Like the designated stops, there just needs to be political will for it, and there just isn't a ton of political will right now. So it's kind of going in. So something that I would think about doing in the future is, taking people with me to lobby the city council.
Yeah, and Mariah, I just want to jump in just to make sure people, because I don't know if everybody's looking at the chat, but that Judy had asked if they considered the hub as a place where people can access other community services. And so and you just answered that question. And I think, part of the story you're telling is that there was political opposition to even having the hub, even having the bus service downtown. So then to say you're going to also have other social services, I would assume would then create additional controversy. But then it is interesting to think, there's this like stigma about using the bus, right? And like assumptions, and and yes, there are people who use bus shelters as a spot to get out of the rain. But I guess, this is a question for Mariah, but maybe for the whole group, of just thinking about where you've seen bus, I think of like in Portland, there's a project to make artful bus shelters to make so that you're kind of saying like, well, we're not just going to have these be utilitarian, like let's make them places that somebody would seek out to come look at whether or not they're riding the bus. So I think in the spirit of building political will, I guess that's kind of a question I have is like, what are some of the ways that we can change how people feel about transit while maintaining that it is, that it's a vital service for the people who need it the most. I don't know, I guess maybe there isn't. So yeah, how do we how do we build more support for transit and not like then make it something else, but have it still work for people who need it the most? I guess that's kind of the question on my mind, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because it was very much, looking back at coverage from that time and talking to Jack and talking to people that were involved, it was very much a classism thing. It was very much like we're trying to revitalize our downtown and we don't want these obviously poor people in downtown. So it was very much like a appearance-based thing.
Mm-hmm.
And also on that note with other services, food and medicine actually is part of the Peer Workforce Navigator project. So those social services we kind of cover that in a separate program. We have a specific staff member that can connect people to that. So if I am out on the street and talking to people and stuff, and somebody does indicate a need for like unemployment or social security, or they need help finding a job or getting connected to an apprenticeship, we have a woman named Susie who's our peer workforce navigator that actually helps us with that. So that is something that we do kind of have in our back pocket, but not specifically in the hub. Oh, so the argument against designated stops along a route, Joe Austin just asked. So there has actually been some pushback from disability rights groups in the area, because instead of being picked up directly in front of their house and they can just flag the bus down, they would have to, walk or, get to a stop, however far away it is.
This is Zoe again. That's interesting because I know of at least one route that the Lakes Region Explorer that did either. So they have designated stops, and then they also have they allow people to flag for the bus to stop. So I wonder if that would be a way of offering up an alternative or compromise.
That would be an interesting alternative to propose. Yeah. Does anybody else have questions? Are folks kind of feeling different post-COVID? I want to hear about because what's happening with Transportation for All is that during COVID we moved virtual, and then things just kind of fell by the wayside, like always happens with every group during COVID. So has anybody found any way to kind of like get re-energized again?
Well, I'll jump in. We're trying to figure out post-COVID what the effects have been. Our ridership is down, and there are several hypotheses. One is that people found other alternatives. Another is that they have forgotten about us. We have an elderly population for the most part that we're serving, and they're coming back slowly. But we're really trying to figure out how to engage more of those folks. I mean, we're rural, so we're talking small numbers to begin with. So that's kind of how we're seeing it. I do think the pause that pandemic created alternative solutions for some people, which is not necessarily bad.
Thank you. And Joe, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I've been talking to a lot of different transit providers and volunteer programs around the state for this project we're working on transportation equity. Not so much on fixed route providers, but I think it's similar. I would say that COVID has had a permanent impact, but it's changed things. A lot of volunteer programs are finding that they're rebounding with volunteers, but not all. And I think that some people are definitely have changed, especially older people have changed how they're going about life. The thing with the bus, especially in Bangor, since I have a former bus person here, Bangor person, who worked on this project, and I just dragged him along, my husband. I think that, I mean, I worked a long time ago with a project in Eastern Maine, trying to see if there was a way to have bus buddies. I see you have something like that, or a way to make it more accessible for older people, to help people feel a little more confident about the buses. I think that's more the issue than it is COVID now. I think it continues to be a challenge with public transportation, unless you are just really completely have no other alternative. And one thing I saw when I was recently down in Southern Maine was, stops where you can text to let somebody know that this is where you'd like to get picked up. And I wonder if that's an option too. Texting seems to work pretty good for a lot of different people.
Yeah, that's also a good idea. I just want to thank you, Joe. Also, I just wanted to highlight Judy's comment in the chat here. I think the pandemic nationally has been connected to social determinants of health, helping the public and funders see the critical role it plays in community, and that has heightened interest in creating solutions. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And I wanted to add to that. I think there's sort of two tracks. So I'm interested in this track of like what would get people riding again, or like maybe their preferences have changed. And then I think part of what Mariah's asking is, how do we get people engaged in giving their input and advocating? And so I think like I'd love to see us continue to talk about both of those. And I was thinking, I don't know if Kat and Marcel, I'm going to call on you, but I feel like that's okay. But just, I think so I'll just say what I have in mind, because I know you have a couple different things going on, but I think you've gone back to doing a bunch of things in person. And I know that it's not always smooth. Like I know then sometimes people are sick and you have to cancel and go back to virtual, but it seems like that's been powerful for you to be like, okay, yes, we've had a pandemic and we need to go back to trying to engage people in person, whether that's meeting with bus ambassadors in person to work on it, or like the Ride With Me event. I don't know. I'd love to have you share some of that thoughts, and other folks too, if they're thinking about how they've gone back to being in person.
Yeah, it was not easy to come back fully in person. People are still working on that. For our programs, most of the meetings are held online, and then other meetings are in person, but we ask people who feel comfortable. Some of the meetings are kind of hybrid. We do like online meetings like this, and then also we include a group of people. When it comes to interpretation, they go to the office in one room with enough space, and then we hire an interpreter to be there to Sorry, that's Maya, the one who's talking. So we hire interpreter to sit in the middle of people who don't speak English, but they join the Zoom meeting from one spot, one room. We facilitate the transportation. When they get to that specific room, then they're able to join the meeting. Or we help people who live in same building. They meet and then join from one computer with one computer. When they join the meeting like this, they can go in one location instead of coming to the office or in a given in a room where everyone can be in, like when we are very many people. So we facilitate people to join from one location, as a way to figure out the best way to keep running, to keep people engaged. I know Kat can add something.
Yeah, thanks, Marcel. Yeah, I think for our programs, hybrid meetings have been working, where specifically for people who need interpretation, we've realized that Zoom's interpretation function actually doesn't work that well. So we were able to kind of, we have the resources to support people to get to the office and have them in one room with an interpreter. For the Ride With Me event that Zoe, you mentioned, that is an event that we piloted and we hope to do host it every year moving forward. It's an event that works to educate decision makers on the transportation challenges that people face every day. So we matched community members, riders, with a decision maker. And so they took the bus or the train from one place to another. And so that kind of fostered a conversation. It also allowed decision makers to see firsthand, the challenges that happen not only on the bus, but even getting to, for example, to the bus stop, and seeing those challenges. And for us, we had to pause that through the pandemic and wait until the time was right, because we even considered kind of having like an online version. Maybe it's just a Zoom call that decision makers could have with a writer and share that way. But we were really glad that we waited, and seeing, something like that where you really want it to be in person. So I think for us, Marcel and I at GPCog, we're kind of slowly moving towards being in person and kind of realizing those moments where it's really important that it is in person, and making that effort. Yeah, but we're definitely still slowly moving back to being in person with different projects.
Thank you, Marcel and Kat, for letting me call on you. What have other people been doing in terms of either in continuing to keep engaged, so trying to keep a group engaged that's, meets regularly, or like getting out there to engage new people who maybe you haven't talked to yet? Just curious how it's looking. Is it looking different, or is it, you just throw on a mask and it's okay?
So for us, for food and medicine, we do have a local coffee shop that's ready to partner with us on handing out some breakfast. So that is coming down the pike. So I'm just gonna get on the bus in the morning with a whole big bag of bagels and go for it.
So Mariah told me about this before when we were chatting to prepare, and I love this idea. And so I'm curious, Mariah, are you envisioning that will then be like a entree to having a conversation with each person? Do you sort of have a plan for how it'll look?
Yeah, that's the goal. So food and medicine, something that really attracted me to food and medicine in the first place is that, you know, the style of organizing is this deep relational organizing where you are a member of the community and you know, go make these connections with people out in the community. So the goal, you know, it's also from COVID funding, because we do have some leftover COVID funding. So we do purchase the meals. So the hope is to get people to know my face, get you know, have conversations, ask questions, and it's kind of a captive audience because they're stuck on the bus.
Totally.
Zoe? This is more rural related, although it does have an impact on urban transit. You know, we're finding a lot of increased need in separate segments that we've never seen before. And right now, trying to get drivers and vehicles to be able to expand service is pretty difficult. And I think that one of our concerns is there may be significant loss of momentum in some sectors. I didn't know if that was something that rang true with anyone else.
Yeah, actually it does. So the community connector in Bangor right now, I just talked to the like chief safety guy over at the community connector, which is the bus system. He was saying that they've started offering incentives for drivers of a couple $1,000s each. And he was saying that, you know, they're starting to pay for people to get their endorsements because you have to have a special endorsement on their license. And they're still having problems even after that. So that's, you know, a major issue.
I don't know how this applies, but we're an all volunteer organization. And so we're using volunteer drivers. And I asked the question here a couple months ago about that issue because as gas prices were going up, we thought we might have to consider augmenting. We were worried about losing drivers. The advice I got here was don't go there if you're not already paying. And I think that's wise because clearly the drivers we have not lost drivers and their motivation is not around money. And I think that's just a whole different ballgame. So we're not looking to entice people with money. We're enticing people with opportunities for community service. And so you get a whole different view. And I don't know if there's a way to augment that all
Joe, you're sort
volunteer
of,
sector.
your internet got a little funny there for a minute. Do you want to repeat the last part of what you said about if there's a way to, I think you were saying you're wondering if there's a way to augment?
Yeah, I don't know if there is a way to integrate or augment the system so that you can build a volunteer component as kind of a ancillary or backup system or something, because I don't think, well, I don't know, but it's going to be hard to create a sustainable system that requires more and more funding. I just don't think people want to pay for it, particularly in a rural area where, you know, that last mile is a long one.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that we're going to need to work very hard collectively, convincing the legislature that they need to increase funding statewide. You know, local match for bus services is becoming more difficult. It was getting more difficult pre-pandemic. I think to your point, Joe, and you know, you all do a great job with your program. There is a method of integration, and we're working with the United Way in Franklin County, trying to do something similar to that. RCAM in Androscoggin County has another small program, And we were just talking with them yesterday about what we can do. As a transit provider, does a lot of contract work, does a lot of grant-based work. We're in a position, unfortunately, where we are kind of compelled to reimburse our drivers. And it is a very, very different kind of a service than what Neighbors Driving Neighbors or what Joe used to work on in Ellsworth can bring to a situation. And no, I think that the unpaid volunteer system is largely more sustainable simply because of that motivation you talked about.
Hmm.
I think also, if I can pipe in here, and thanks for the endorsement, Greg. It's really also a matter of some partnerships that need to be built between municipalities and transit providers and volunteer systems. That's sort of what this project I'm working on is trying to develop. And also there's other things out there that could be utilized, such as the Go Maine and Agile Mile could be a factor too, to help people with odd, longer trips. So I think we need to really look at some partnerships, and the municipalities and these transit providers, including the community connector, could be a big part of that.
Hmm.
I know this puts a lot of pressure on you, Ryan, but I know a lot of us are looking with great hope to what is going to come of this project that you're working on with Go Maine, Agile Mile, and just see how that can work to integrate the systems and services more efficiently.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. In some ways, it's good to have some pressure because we think there is a real opportunity for Go Maine to be sort of a coordinator / clearinghouse for some of these services. And, we've had several conversations internally and with some other folks on this call and others about incorporating some of the volunteer driver networks more fully into the Go Maine / Agile Mile system. So there's definitely some work we have to do around that, but a huge opportunity to fill some gaps around the state, I think.
And maybe I'm stating the obvious, but and this is Zoe, but I think what my understanding of what folks are talking about is saying, okay, in a given area, you might have some rides that are provided through a fixed route bus service, but then you would also be able to say, oh yeah, the bus service stops at 6 p.m. or it doesn't run on Saturdays and Sundays. For those times or for those days, we have this, request a ride, on demand ride kind of program. So trying to make it so that people would, because I think often it's like when you get on the bus, for instance, where I live in Portland, so I have pretty good bus access, but there's nothing on the bus that tells me what I would do for rides in the off hours. So it's like, how do we connect the dots? It sounds like that's part of what people are talking about, is so that I would know, like, yeah, the bus stops running at, I'm sort of lucky the bus stops running around 10:30 where I live, but here's what, so say I worked out at a restaurant and say there was a ride, there was like a micro transit program that I could get that information. I feel like that's part of what's lacking, is it's like you know the one piece, but you don't know what the other pieces are, if they exist. And I also hear that there's places where they don't exist, so we need to figure out how to make them happen. Oh, sorry, Joe, were you gonna?
Well, only thing I was going to say is one thing we used to do from the Hancock County region and people needing to get to Portland would be to provide the volunteer transportation to get to, like, Concord Trailways or one of those services. Down East Transportation is a fixed route provider in our area. We would also connect with them. So there is, the volunteer can be that last mile to connect to the transit provider.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So it's like connecting across the modes, but then also knowing that it's even possible. And I think of it as like, you know, most people are used to using Google Maps or like some, you know, Apple Maps, and it'll show you that you can use Uber. What if it just popped up in Google Maps that there was a volunteer ride program also, and how you contact them? And so I think that's sort of the dream that we're hoping for. Well, I wanted to spend a little bit of time giving an update on Moving Maine's policy priorities and how you can be involved with those, which I think is really actually very apropos of the conversation that we're having. And thank you, Mariah, so much for both sharing info and being a great conversation stimulator for this. So you're welcome to come back every time and help get people talking. So I am going to share my screen, and I'm basically going to show you a document. So it's not going to be the most exciting screen share, but just to, we're very excited to have officially adopted these policy priorities for Moving Maine. And they came about through, I mean, many of you were involved, many people were involved, and we, you know, had a very inclusive process to get to a place where we could identify what are the priorities that we want to see Moving Maine support taking policy action on. And policy action may be forwarding a piece of legislation, but it isn't necessarily. And so I think, though, one of the purposes of this document is to be able to educate decision makers who just may not be aware of how much some of these things matter to people who can't drive or are not able to afford to drive, or, you know, simply want to get around their community without needing to have a car. So we ended up with what we call affectionately our buckets. So our first bucket is around increasing the affordability of transportation. And so there's a work group that started meeting this week that you can join on. And the focus of that work group is on exploring these, really the second and third bullets here. So overall, with increasing affordability of transportation, increasing state funding for transit is, you know, many of us see as a key strategy. And there's actually another work group that's convening that just met this morning that I believe Craig is part of, leading, or at least integrally involved with. And so that folks can get involved with that. And I would encourage you, if you are interested specifically in that piece, to join that effort. That is led by Grow Smart Maine and Build Maine. And the work group that Moving Maine is leading is about the possibility of a universal basic mobility program, and pieces around fare related barriers. And so Hannah Hudson's leading that work group, and I can resend the link for folks if they want to get involved with that. And Craig, did you want to say a word about the policy action work group? I saw you came off mute. I didn't know if you wanted to say something about that.
No, I just wanted to say that you're right, that this Grow Smart Maine group has convened. There's one of the concerns that I have is that there seems to be a lot of overlap between the transit policy group there and what we're doing here. I'd love to see better integration between the two to be able to unify the message going back to the legislators. It's very important work, and we are looking at different cohorts that we're reaching through them. But by all means, I encourage folks to take a look at your link, reach out to Nancy, Kara, the group at Grow Smart, and at least be aware of how they're handling this as we move forward with Moving Maine as well.
Thank you, Craig. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I actually have a meeting this afternoon where I will, maybe I'll see you, but where to be working to connect the dots. I think at this point, we see it as a bit separate, that a universal basic mobility pilot or a free fare program is outside of the scope of what the Grow Smart Build Maine conversation is, but we want to be coordinated for sure. And so I'm hoping to connect those dots today and ongoing. So our second bucket here, and this is the other one where we have a work group, is ensure access to community and public transportation. So this work group kicks off tomorrow. And as you can see, there's more than 3 strategies. They continue. There's I guess 5, but the top ones are the ones that we're devoting energy to right now. And so looking for ways to improve what we have, what we're currently operating through the state, through streamlining systems. And so that's pretty focused on state-funded transportation. The second one is around, is there a way to offer more non-emergency medical transportation using the structure that the state already has? And so, you know, we've heard very loud and clear that there's a gap. There are people who fall outside of Maine Care eligibility, yet don't have resources. And so looking at how we might be able to address those folks' needs. And this in this category, we also have a piece around better supporting volunteer driver programs and potentially increasing state mileage reimbursement rates to keep track with inflation. So that work group kicks off tomorrow, and I'm chairing that one. Love to find other folks who want to co-lead it with me. The other 2 we have are, this is the third one is around increasing the safety and accessibility of walking, biking, and rolling. There is another Build Maine, Grow Smart Maine work group that's focused on complete streets that I'm very involved with. I'm one of the chairs of, and so Moving Maine is not doing its own work group in this arena, but we would love to have folks be involved. We are monitoring opportunities to champion good policy beyond at the state level. And so we had, I feel like a great success for Moving Maine that we turned out 4 people to give public comment to the Greater Portland, what's called the Metropolitan Planning Organization last week, and voice very clearly the importance of complete streets for older adults, people with disabilities, and you know, and other folks who need to be able to move about outside of cars. And so that policy is moving along. They decided not to vote on it, but I think I feel optimistic that it will pass. And that would be a regional complete streets policy that would cover that Greater Portland region. So the final piece is around increasing coordination of transportation efforts. And I think this is a piece that we're currently working on a bit more in the background, and the steering committee will be talking about it at our next meeting, looking at how do we get more mobility management in Maine? How would we get regional mobility management programs for Maine? And again, that would be somebody whose job it is to say, I hear you, you know, that things have changed and we need to start up these other solutions, and I can help convene the partners with you and provide that capacity. They have them in lots of places all over the country. New Hampshire just figured out how to launch their own system of mobility management programs. So that's something we're working on advancing for Maine, and hopeful that to play a role in championing that. So that's our platform. You can, I did link to it in the email I sent out as a reminder to this meeting. If you are interested in being involved in any, I know many of you I know are already on some of the work groups. So, but if you haven't yet joined and you'd like to, please do reach out. So we're just about out of time for today. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Is there a topic that you'd like to see us take up, or a tweak you'd like to see us make to how we run these sessions? Please reach out and let me know. You can email info@movingmaine.org. We are actually I'll give a little plug for next month in October. We have actually Marcel and Kat will be presenting on the Travel Helpers program, which is a program that's designed to help folks who are in helping roles, so case managers, case workers, patient navigators, housing coordinators, to help them help people figure out their travel options. So it's a pretty cool program, and so we're excited to have them join us and share about it. So we hope we'll get to see you next month.
Thank you, Zoe.
Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.
Stay well, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for inviting me.